Hey folks, welcome to another edition of Play Branson, where you get to know Branson's entertainers better. And on today's show for the first time, we have Lee Hendrix, a performer and entertainer here in Branson. Really looking forward to talking to him. And folks, it is December already, and man, how the year has flown. For those of you that are watching that are maybe here in town and you're here on vacation, I want to give you a few tips. If you haven't seen this yet, this is the Flavor of Branson Dining Guide. You can find this in most hotel lobbies, and it'll list every restaurant in the Branson area. It has about 25, 30 coupons in it. So as you figure out where to eat, this is a great resource tool to find your next dining option. The other thing I wanted to mention, if you haven't seen yet or got our magazine for this year, Play Branson is out on racks as well around town. This is a free publication. It's telling you everything going on in Branson. If you haven't got this, you want to be sure to check it out. Also, we got Shoji and an article about him and coming back to Branson for his show over at the IMAX complex in the Little Opry Theater, so you want to check that out as well. So pick those publications up. They're free and all around Branson. We'll be back in just a second with more Play Branson.
There are so many things to do in Branson. You need help planning and booking all your fun. You need iBranson.com. You can find everything Branson has to offer from your computer, tablet, or cell phone. You can even buy tickets online or talk to one of their friendly Branson travel specialists. There's no sales pitches, no delivery fees, no service fees, and no waiting. It's fast and easy. Find your fun at iBranson.com. Do it all online or call 877-ENTERTAIN. That's 877-368-3782. iBranson.com.
Hey folks, welcome back to Play Branson, and today on the show, for the first time ever, I have Lee Hendrix. He's a musician and entertainer in Branson. Lee, welcome to the show.
Thank you, Chris. It's great to be with you. So awesome to be here. Thank you for asking me to do this. Yeah.
And so you're in a couple shows currently in Branson, and one of them is the Sedaka songbook, correct?
Yeah, it's correct. The Sedaka songbook is a tribute to the music of Neil Sedaka, the old pop singer from the 50s and 60s and 70s. And it's a wonderful, fun show that I hadn't planned on doing. It just kind of happened.
Okay.
And I was working at a theater, the God and Country Theater, back in 2014, playing in a morning show there. I was just a keyboard player and a singer there. And the owner at the time, Dick Easton, I guess he liked what I did in that show. I didn't do very much, but he approached me one day right before the show and asked me what I was doing the next year in 2015, and I said, I'm playing for this show. And he says, no, you're not. He said, the show's going out. And I thought, oh, I'm going to need a job. So he said, I want to give you your own show. And I thought, okay, I've never had my own show, didn't really want my own show, but I thought, well, okay, it's an opportunity. So I said, what do you want me to do? And he said, have you ever sang any Neil Sedaka? And I said, no, I've never sang a Neil Sedaka song in my entire life. And he says, can you? And I said, well, I need a job, so I guess I'll learn some Neil Sedaka. So I told him, I said, now Neil Sedaka is a tenor singer. He sings real high. And I said, I'm a baritone. I can't sing that high. He said, you don't have to sound like him. Just do his music. But you've got to write the show too. And I thought, oh gosh, I got to star in it. I've got to write the show. And it was kind of a little overwhelming, but I thought, well, it's a neat challenge. I'm going to do it. So the season of the show I was in ended, and we were going into the winter, and I thought, I've got to put this Neil Sedaka show together. And I drove by the theater there at God and Country one day, and I saw this sign on the side of the building that said, coming in 2015, the best of Neil Sedaka, the Carpenters, and the Captain and Tennille. And I thought, now wait a minute, he just wants me to do Neil Sedaka. I didn't know I'm doing the Carpenters, the Captain and Tennille. What is this? And so I was overwhelmed with that, and then I started researching Neil Sedaka's life. And he was a Jewish kid that lived in Brooklyn, New York. His dad was a cab driver. And he was trained at a young age at the Juilliard School to be a classical piano player. But through some things that happened, he got into rock and roll and started writing songs and was discovered. And he and a friend of his, Howard Greenfield, wrote all these great songs that we've known for years, like Calendar Girl and Happy Birthday, Sweet 16. The Love Will Keep Us Together for the Captain and Tennille. And so I started looking at all of that, and I thought, okay, I've got to build a show around the history of Neil Sedaka and do his music. There's over 150 shows here in Branson. And so I'm thinking, okay, you got to sell this thing. And so, and I'm thinking, this is my first show. I don't want to fail. And so I started thinking, now how am I going to entertain all these people with a show of my own about Neil Sedaka, a guy I've never sang before? I started thinking about my background is in radio. I was in radio for 13 years. And I thought, okay, why don't you make this show where you give background on the songs and tell people how they came about, tell them about Neil's life, why this song is significant, and just gives and kind of tease every song before you do it.
Almost like a history,
right? Exactly,
of the show.
And so I started thinking about the old Casey Kasem that had the America's Top 40, and I thought, do it like he did it, and just kind of not make it a radio show, but do it in that kind of a format. And that was the hit. People said, we didn't know this about this song. We didn't know that about this song. And you made it so interesting. Plus, we played the songs. We sang the songs. I had a female vocalist that sang with me. We did all of these great songs because Neil wrote for people like Connie Francis and Karen Carpenter and all like that. So, long story short, we built the show around that. And it was really, really successful. And in fact, the very first year we did this in 2015, the Branson Show Awards gave us the morning show of the year, and I thought, oh my goodness. So we kept doing the show, and then we left God and Country, and I went on tour with country singer Mo Bandy, and I was touring with him, and then we wound up taking the show to the Uptown Cafe and did a show called Breakfast with Sedaka. And then I wound up working for a guy by the name of Mickey Gilley for 6 years. I was his piano player. And so I couldn't do the show anymore. I was on tour. And so my good friend Jonathan Edwards reached out to me in 2021 and said, hey, I'm working at the Majestic Theater, which is the old steakhouse, and said, we want to bring the Sedaka show back. So we brought it back, and then we made it an afternoon show in 2022. And we're going to be at the God and Country Theater in 2023, where we originally started the show as an afternoon show.
Yeah.
So it's a lot of fun. It's neat.
So let's go way back in your history, because obviously before 2015 you were doing stuff in the entertainment world, or you were kind of being led that way. So kind of take people way back in your history.
Well, going way back, my music interest started when I was very, very young. I remember seeing the Beatles
oh, wow.
on the Ed Sullivan Show. Now, that's dating myself. And I remember as a little boy watching the Beatles on the Ed Sullivan Show on television. And I thought, that's what I want to do when I grow up. And my mother came to me when I was 8, and she knew that I liked music so well. I would sing along with records, and I would, try to emulate, singers. And she said, how would you like to learn how to play piano? And I said, okay. I thought this would be kind of fun. And so Mom and Dad arranged me to get with a piano teacher. They bought me a piano, and I started taking lessons. And I could only read music. I couldn't play by ear. And when I was 16, I was playing piano for a rural country church down in southeast Missouri, where I'm from. And there was a lady in the church that she said, there's a guy that she works with wants to start a Southern gospel group, and he's looking for a piano player. And they thought that because I played for the church, they thought I would be perfect for this guy's new group he was starting. And so they came and talked to me and said, you got to play by ear. And I said, I can't play by ear. I said, I only play by note. And he said, we're going to pray the Lord gives you the ability to play by ear. And so I sat down at the piano and started plunking things out. And I just kind of, I figured it out. And I developed my own style. So I played all over southeast Missouri with different Southern gospel groups. But I wanted to eventually do it professionally. But so in 1983, I got into radio. And just by accident, I was playing for a Southern gospel group, and one of the guys in the band was, he was a DJ for a radio station. And he was leaving to pastor a church, and he said, the perfect guy for the job I'm leaving would be Lee Hendrix. He knows this music. He knows Southern gospel, and it was a Southern gospel radio station. He says, he knows this music. I'm leaving, he said, but I had no radio training at all. And so, but I knew the music, and he said, I'm going to recommend you for the job. And so the guy that owned the radio station was our manager for our group. So he put me to work, and I was a natural at it. And I thought, oh goodness, this is different. And so I started being a radio DJ, and we won some awards during that time. And I thought, okay. So in 1994, I was doing a Christian country radio show.
Okay, hold on. Hold that thought just right there. We got to take a quick break. We're going to be back in just a second. So hang tight. We'll be back more with Lee Hendrix. Hey folks, welcome back to the show. We're here with Lee Hendrix, a entertainer here in Branson, Missouri. And Lee, you were just talking about the next stage of your broadcast career.
I was working in radio, and in 1994 I was doing a Christian country radio show on Sunday mornings. And Christian country was new at the time, whereas it wasn't Southern gospel, it was country music that had Christian lyrics. Mm-hmm. And I met an entertainer from here in Branson, and he had sang all over the United States. He had a recording deal in Nashville. His name was Bruce Haynes. Bruce and I became really good friends, and he would often come down to my area and perform at local churches. He had family down there. And so I was asked to open up one night for him at a concert, be his opening act at a church. And so I did this, and after the concert, we went out to eat together, and he looked at me down the table where we were eating, and he said, how'd you like to move to Branson? And I said, okay. And he said, have you ever thought about working in Branson? I said, no. And he said, would you like to? And so I said, okay. He said, I'm needing a piano player and an assistant worship leader for our church that I'm working in now. He was coming off the road. And so I came up the next week. They tried me out, and I moved up here a week later. And
that was quick.
That was, yeah. It was just like, it was like, and so started doing worship there with him in the church. And then one really neat thing that happened. Of course, he's an amazing songwriter, has had several songs that have been recorded by different people. And one day he came into the church office. And he said, hey, Lee, I want to talk to you. And I said, oh, what's going on? He said, I've got this song that's in my head. He says, I've got 2 lines to it. And he says, you've got to help me finish it. I think it's going to be a big song. And I said, sure it is. And he says, no, it's going to be a big song. And I said, well, if you want me to help you write it, it's not going to be a big song, so you might. But anyway, he took me into his office. He said, I've got these 2 lines, and I gave him the 3rd line, and then we arranged the music for it. We started singing it in our church, and the church people really liked it, our congregation. And one night, he gets a phone call from Jeff Easter. And for those watching may be familiar with Jeff and his wife Sherry. They're from Georgia, and they are a very, very popular Southern gospel group that sing with Bill Gaither. And they called Bruce up and they said, hey, could you send us some of your songs? We're thinking about recording some of your songs for our next album. And so I was at the church one day, and Bruce was out playing golf. And he said, just send him some of our songs. And I thought, okay, I've got this one song. And I looked at this demo tape that we had. It was on a cassette. And I said, they're not going to record that. And I looked at it and I thought, I'll send it to them. So I sent it to him. The song was called Praise His Name. And so I sent it to him with some other songs. 2 weeks later, he comes into the office and he says, you're not going to believe this, but Jeff and Sherry Easter are going to record 3 of our songs. I'm going, what? He said, you just accomplished in 3 weeks what a lot of songwriters try to do for years. And he says, you're in. You're an official songwriter now. So they got the tape, that demo tape I'd sent, and Sherry was listening to it after a tour, and she broke down crying. She says, we've got to record this Praise His Name song that Lee Hendrix and Bruce Haynes wrote in Branson. So they recorded it, and it did very, very well, and it was awarded the most popular Southern gospel song, the #1 gospel song of the 1990s.
That's awesome. Congratulations.
Thank you.
That's great.
It was so awesome. So
isn't it interesting how God makes things work sometimes?
Exactly. Oh my gosh, I have so many stories.
Yeah.
But anyway, that song did very, very well. And then in 2000, I was still working there at the church with Bruce. And we had an entertainer that came to our church by the name of Rodney Dillard, and I'm pretty sure you know who Rodney was. Rodney, of course, was on the Andy Griffith Show and on television, and he's one of the darlings, and he lived here in Branson and managed a recording studio. And so he said, I'm starting a show at what's now the Grand Country Music Hall, but it was the 76 Music Hall and at the time, and he says, I'm starting an afternoon show, I want you to be in my show. And I said, I've never been in a show before. You play bluegrass. There's no piano in bluegrass. And he says, there's piano in my show. I want you to be in my show. And I said, okay, all right, we'll do it. So I was with Rodney that year. The show was called The Boys from Mayberry, and we did it for a year. Bruce was in the show. And then the show ended. And I started working in a show in Eureka Springs, Arkansas for about a year. Came back to Branson, started working for the Country Tonight Show, which is no longer here. I played piano for them. Then went back to the Ozark Mountain Hoedown in Eureka Springs for 7 years, and then they sold. And I came back to Branson. That's when I wound up at God and Country doing the show we talked about with the Neil Sedaka show happens.
What a great history. But you know what's interesting, even at a young age, like you wanted to be an entertainer or a musician.
A musician, yeah.
And just how your path has been an interesting path. Now, let's talk about this show, the Neil Sedaka show, because you're going to be back in 2023 at God and Country. So if somebody's never seen it, what can they expect?
Well, right now our schedule is for Fridays at 2 o'clock in the afternoon. And what they can expect is they're going to hear just a lot of great music from the 50s, 60s, and 70s that Neil Sedaka is he's familiar for, and he created the big songs like Happy Birthday, Sweet 16, Calendar Girl, Breaking Up Is Hard to Do, Ooh, I Hear Laughter in the Rain. And then also the artists that he wrote songs for, like Connie Francis, like Where the Boys Are, Tony Tennille of the Captain and Tennille, the big group in the 70s, Love Will Keep Us Together. Their biggest song was a Neil Sedaka song. He also wrote his most popular song, the most recorded song of any song he ever wrote was a song called Solitaire, which was big for the Carpenters, and it was also big for a guy named Elvis Presley and a guy that performed here in Branson for several years, the late Andy Williams. It was a big song for him too.
Wow.
And so we do all of those songs. We have a lot of video, and we talk about Neil's background and the things he went through. One highlight was in 1964 at the top of his career when everything's going good. A band that I just mentioned a few moments ago that I was a fan of as a little kid, the Beatles, come to America. That does it for Neil Sedaka. His career's over because everybody likes the British bands.
Wow.
And we talk about that and then how he comes back in the 70s. And we just do some great music, and it's a lot of fun. People have said, that they really enjoy the history and it's a great show to do.
You know, Lee, I think you're just a great example of just the quality of entertainers that we have in Branson, and just the fact that #1 Southern gospel song of the 1990s. And this is why, one of the reasons, folks, we do this show is because you don't necessarily learn all this on stage because they don't have time to tell you of all the things they've done. And to me, this is just another great example of just the quality of entertainers that we have in town and just all the things that you've done. I know you've also been, besides being on the road with Mickey Gilley, Mo Bandy, Johnny Lee.
Yeah.
Like you played with lots of entertainers over time. And so, folks, we want you to go see his show next in 2023 over at God and Country. And what is the exact title of it?
It's called, it'd be called The Best of the Sedaka Songbook.
Okay, The Best of the Sedaka Songbook, folks. Go check it out in 2023 over at God and Country. We'll be back in just a moment to wrap the show up.
The Christmas season is a perfect time for family traditions. Branson's Lights of Joy, Branson's all-LED Christmas display drive-thru is a great way to create those lasting Christmas memories. Discover over 250 Christmas displays in an amazing drive-thru tunnel with state-of-the-art lighting. Branson's Lights of Joy is located just north of Sight and Sound Theater on Expressway Lane. Open nightly through January 2nd. Santa loves these lights and will be there on select nights. Visit lightsofjoydrivethru.com for more info and to book online.
Hey folks, welcome back to the show today. We want to thank Lee for coming out and sharing his experience in the entertainment business and just everything he's done here in Branson and even before then. You might be able to catch him, depending on when you're watching this show. He might be over doing a few more shows over at the Majestic Theater, but he will be in 2023 over at God and Country Theater doing his Sedaka show, so you want to be able to check him out there. Next week, our guest will be Jay McFerrin with Shepherd of the Hills, and he may have a special guest with him. We're trying to wait to confirm that, but you'll want to watch that show and learn about some new stuff that they have going on out there at Christmas time. If you haven't been to Branson at Christmas, you still have time to come. There's still tons of shows going on. We've got Christmas lights galore, Christmas shows. You can come here and shop. There's so much to do. Matt Gum, upcoming events, Matt Gum and Company, they've got a show going on December 19th. That's a limited engagement show over at the Clay Cooper Theater. And then, folks, here's the deal. There are tons of shows going on New Year's Eve, and it's not too early to start planning your New Year's Eve celebration here in Branson. And I will tell you, most of these shows sell out. So if you haven't booked your New Year's Eve trip to Branson, you may want to do that quickly. There's a whole bunch of people performing on New Year's, some in the morning, some in the afternoon, some in the evening, so you can get a lot of shows in on New Year's Eve. Some of them, for instance, are over at the Americana Theater. They're having the All-Star New Year's Eve show. Anthems of Rock has a show. The Clay Goods Jamboree, a combination of Clay Cooper and the Hay Goods. Dolly Parton's got a show that evening. The Grand Jubilee. Hamner's New Year's Eve Fiesta Party. The Hughes Brothers have a New Year's Eve party show. Reza. The Rockin' New Year's Eve Bash at the Nashville Roadhouse Live, and the Texas Tenors have a show as well that evening. So lots of people having shows on New Year's Eve. We'll be back next week with more Play Branson.